welcome to today's webinar. My name is Christelle Rinn and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at HRLocker. On today's webinar, we'll be going through the many HR legislation updates that have been teed up for 2024. And we are delighted to have Joe Thompson here with us from Inside HR to go through, I suppose, to depart his wisdom on us and to go through all the legislation updates and also answer any questions that you have. So as always, we do have the questions and answers section open. I have Nikki with me today who's manning it. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please post them into the questions and answers section, and I will throw Joe, who's on the hot seat today, to answer any of your questions. So thank you, Joe, very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
No pressure. Everybody's got their questions ready for you.
Great.
So Joe, if you just want to give a brief introduction of Inside HR and I suppose what your role is there.
Yes, I'm a HR and employment law consultant for Inside HR. We deal with companies all over Ireland. We do training, we do any processes that you need to be done, such as disciplinaries, grievances, investigations. So we're an all-encompassing consultancy. So whatever you need, whatever troubles you, we can give you a hand with that.
Brilliant. So Joe, this year I think has been there's been a lot going on this year, hasn't there? Like, I don't remember any other year that there has been so many specific legislation updates, specific around leave, about how we work, even around rate of pay. Is this year, is it a lot, or have most years been like this?
I think this year and last year particularly have been heavy in terms of legislative updates. I mean, last year we had the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, which brought with it a lot. So we found out then that domestic violence leave would be coming in. We found out that we get medical care purpose leave for people who are carers or parents. There was also the breastfeeding entitlement went up to 2 years as well. So there's a lot in terms of social protections that came in last year, but that kind of theme is carrying on into this year as well. Yeah, it's a lot.
So what we'll do is we're going to go through the long list. We'll go through each one by one. And like I said, if anybody has a question throughout, just drop it into the Q&A. I might not get to it straight away, but I'll interject Joe every once in a while to throw a question at Joe. Also, just remember, if we'll share Inside HR and Joe's contact details at the end. If anybody has a more specific question that they'd like to go through that's very specific to their company, but please do just put in your details, or we'll be sending Joe's details out afterwards. As always, this webinar will be recorded and will be sent out at the end of the webinar if you can't stay for all of it. So Joe, I suppose if we start first with the increased national minimum wage, that kind of affects almost every company at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the national minimum wage has increased year on year and every year since 2016. Back then it was €9.15. So now we're at a stage we're at €12.70. So there's a lot that's happened, and it shows that the government are going with the idea that people need to have a living wage, and that's what it's building up to in around 2026. But at the moment, it's $12.70 a year for those that are 20 or age 20 and upwards. And obviously, there are some challenges to business when it comes to regular increases in the minimum wage. Obviously, there's the cost of operating, but more so the employers being challenged by the administration of keeping up with that as well, in terms of keeping up with the increases. The WRC reported that since 2019, there's been a steady rise in employers that have been in breach of the national minimum wage. So in 2019, there was 110 cases. That's gone up 107% last year. So it's really important to keep on top of when January 1st comes around, that these employees that are on the minimum wage are updated to the new minimum wage when it comes through. Mm-hmm. So it is very important. The government did take on recommendations by the Low Pay Commission as well to make sure that the minimum wage went up at a standard that was considered to be fair. Yeah. And these are people that, they often work in carious work, they work long hours, they work unsociable hours, or what we consider to be Monday, Saturday and Sunday as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's linked to their well-being. So it's a good thing that the wage and the rate is going up as it is.
Yeah. And Joe, specifically, I suppose this changed a few years ago in regards to the under 18 rate, under 16. And I have spoken to a number of employers who they would have in the past hired somebody at 16, but now they're saying that in terms of the paperwork and the timesheets that have to go through it and the difference in wages, that I suppose it's just easier not to go down that route. Have you kind of seen that yourself, or is that, yeah?
Yeah, it's the same situation as having to deal with yearly increases and keeping up with them. I mean, there is a rate for each. A 19-year-old is $11.43 an hour at the moment. I think it's $10.16 for an 18-year-old, and then under 18s are $8.89 at the moment.
Yeah.
So again, you're having to do that every birthday, really, instead of every 1st of January, to make sure you're keeping up with the standard of the minimum wage. So yeah, a lot of people do just go with, this person's working for me, I'll give them minimum wage, which is, for those 20 and upwards. And hopefully I won't have to update it every year, but at the moment, since 2016, it has been every year. So yeah, it is quite difficult keeping up with it, but it's important at the same time.
And that's probably a good point, is that you have to outweigh you have to weigh up the administration costs to be looking at, okay, this person turned 18 or this person 19, versus do we just give everybody the 20-year-old minimum wage and just leave it at that, because I don't need to be monitoring when people are turning 18 or 19.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, the sick leave policy then as well, the sick leave legislation that came in last year at 3 days. We've seen it move to 5 days at the moment. Do you want to maybe expand exactly kind of what that covers?
So, I mean, as we all know, it came in last year. There were some challenges to that, but it is going to be increasing again year on year. So this year it's gone up to 5, 2025 will be 7, and 2026 will be 10 days, respectively. So, there are some stipulations involved. In order to claim sick pay, you need to be certified by your doctor from day 1 of your sickness. You need to have worked for the company for 13 weeks as well. But it doesn't matter whether or not they're on probation or they're an intern or an apprentice. These people are all entitled to sick pay as well. Same for part-time workers. Sick pay is paid at the normal rate of pay. So, if you're normally getting bonuses, or if you're normally getting things like commission, then that's not included. They get, it's 70% of their normal work pay, and it's capped at €110 per day as well. The other thing to consider as well is that if your company offers a more favourable scheme, then it's dealt with under your company's occupational sick pay scheme. It's whichever one is more favourable. And there's been an interesting case actually came through the WRC last October, and it involved Musgraves, who won a case actually because their own offer is for 8 weeks paid sick. But in order to qualify for that, you need to work there for 6 months, and the first 3 days are not paid. So the employee brought a case to say that it's not fair because I don't get paid from day 1 if I'm certified. But the adjudicator found that it's quite clear that if this company offers 8 weeks sick pay, then it's much more preferable for them to use that scheme. So the other thing to consider here as well is that this was introduced for people that had no sick pay scheme. Primarily, that was the purpose. So Musgraves actually won that case, but it is important to have clear policies in place for dealing with sick pay.
And I suppose that's the clear thing with all of these legislation updates, is that a lot of companies do an increase of what this basic legislation is. So, for example, we're talking about national minimum wage. A lot of companies on this call will pay massively in extent of minimum wage. Same with sick leave. Like you said, it's aimed at people who had a 0 sick leave policy. It's not aimed at giving an extra expense to companies. It's aimed at kind of, those companies who weren't participating to begin with. Just a couple of questions on the sick leave, Joe, if that's okay, is so to be very clear, so it's from it's 5 days this year, paid up to 70% of the person's salary, but capped at, what did you say per day?
€110 per day.
110. And that extra, on day 6 if you're not paying, the employee is going to claim social welfare after that, if you're not paying or whatever they want to do.
Yeah, they go on to illness benefit after that. The other thing to consider as well is that to kind of demonstrate that this is for people that were primarily in precarious employment, a lot of people now have 2 jobs to make ends meet. So what it provides for is that the person who, if they do have 2 jobs, they get sick pay from both.
Oh, yeah.
So they get 5 days from one employer and they get an additional 5 days from the other employer as well.
Mm-hmm. And then just, I know you said specifically that the cert has to be from day 1, but let's say if somebody's out for say 7 days and the first 3 days haven't been certified and then they go on certified leave, the first 3 days can still be not paid and then the rest is paid.
That's still fine, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Super. Again, if anybody has any questions, that they just want to pop them in there. But I think so just a question here, actually, when I said it. What happens after the 5 days sick leave is paid? Is it only once a year? So I suppose I'm out in January for 5 days, I get paid those and certified, and I get paid for those sick leave. In June, I'm out for another 3 days.
You only get paid for the 3 days.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the leave is from, unlike the organisation Working Time Act, the leave is from January to December. So it's each calendar year you're entitled to 5 days paid sick. If you go over those 5 days, then you don't get paid and you have to claim other relief. So that could be illness benefit, sick pay, something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then from the 1st of January next year, we're going into 7 days.
Yeah.
And
then 10 in 2026.
Yeah. Okay, so the expanded paid domestic violence leave. Do you want to maybe just go through that a bit, Joe?
Yeah, so I mean, this came in late last year. It's seems to be an escalating nationwide issue. And the statistics around why this leave was introduced are quite concerning. From 2020, 20,000 women and children claimed support from domestic violence relief charities, as it were, and the guards have actually said that there's been a 13% increase year on year since then. So it gives you an idea of how important it was that this leave was brought in. Mm-hmm. It entitles the employee to 5 days paid leave if they're experiencing domestic violence. It came out of last year's big piece of legislation, which was the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. The leave is there primarily for, to seek respite, to go to doctor's appointments, to deal with legal proceedings or securing accommodation, working with support services, really. So there's no service requirement here. It's not like sick leave where you need 13 days. You can claim domestic violence leave from the first day of employment. Obviously, much like force majeure, it's immediate. It needs to be done straight away. There's no kind of like, can I book this in the future? Another thing to consider as well is that it can be due to domestic abuse that has happened in the past. It can be current or ongoing as well. Types of leave, it can be physical violence, it can be threat, it can be emotional, it can be digital, it can be economic, and it can be coercive control as well. So there's quite a large area which somebody can claim domestic violence leave as well. Mm-hmm. You are eligible if the person perpetrating the abuse is a former or current spouse. If you can even be a partner or a child who's over 18 and not financially dependent upon you as well. So again, there's quite a lot there. You can also claim it in the third person as well. So if your own spouse or civil partner or a cohabitant or a child under 18 is experiencing it, you can claim domestic leave on behalf of them to care for them. You need to inform your employer of the situation, but at the same time, you're not obliged to tell them specific information regarding the abuse, and it's not in line with the legislation or the intent of the legislation for the employer to request proof that something has happened to you. So there is a certain amount of trust that's required on both sides here when it comes to this leave and dealing with it. And as a HR professional, this will be probably the most difficult situation you'll have to deal with in the workplace. So you need to exhibit a lot of care, a lot of empathy for those in that position. You need to, if you do have an employee assistance program, make sure it's highlighted to the people as well. If It could be that you might want to have resources and information available to give to them, such as legal aid, counselling services, and contact numbers for shelters as well. It is a very difficult situation to address. You know, some employers may feel it's not their place to intervene in what they might perceive as a personal matter as well, but companies need to start addressing this matter through training, would be my advice on it. You know, it's particularly important that the management structure who deal with these matters as a first point of contact need to understand how to deal with it, how to deal with the employee, and also how to process that information.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have a strong policy and process in place. So if you haven't had an update to your handbook, for example, since even 2 years ago, there is a lot that would need to go in there now after all the legislative updates from, say, 2022 onwards. But these are important ones, and this is a leave that is brand new to us. It's still being worked out by everybody involved. So but it's a very important one. It's great that Ireland have actually introduced it now.
Yeah, and I would say it's when I was speaking to people, a lot of people originally, I suppose they were a little bit concerned about how you would deal with the leave, or how you would deal with people coming to ask. A great source, and I'll just get Nikki to drop it into the chat, is dv@work.ie, and that's a Women's Aid website. So Women's Aid have been, we've actually just done a podcast with them. They've been contracted by the government to kind of give supports for this leave. So that's dv@work.ie. And you can, they've lots of supports in regards to DV training, if that's the person, so you can, from a HR perspective, kind of understand how to deal with somebody who is coming to you in an extraordinarily vulnerable moment to discuss if they're going through domestic violence at home, how to deal with that, how to respond. So they do some great training on there, and they also do a big kind of policy and procedure around it as well. Which is good. And I think the couple of bits, Joe, that I think is important to address is that the domestic violence leave it's not sick leave, you know, so it shouldn't be construed in the same way it is if somebody is coming to you saying that they need to go to a solicitor to book an appointment because they need to get out of the house, or, you know, they're going into they're going to shelter or something like that. It's not sick leave. It is that it's facilitated in regards to the issues that they're having at home. And also important is that, like you said, Joe, is that it is also if you are, for example, if it's something that's happening to a sibling of yours or a family member or something like that, you also can come and talk to your employer about it as well. One of the things I suppose that I wouldn't agree with Joe is that a lot of the feedback from this is that people might take advantage of it, or just come in and be like, hey, I need to have 3 days off, down to the Domestic Violence Leave Act. I don't really see that as going to happen, because it's such a vulnerable thing to come forward and say to people, that I think it being abused is I don't see that happening really. You know, yeah.
In my experience of dealing with people who are coming to you in those vulnerable positions, I don't see somebody making up a story such as that to come and try and get leave. Often the problem is getting information from them, or them telling you that something is going on at home, would be the more pressing issue, and the one that employers should be more concerned with, rather than an absolute anomaly that could be somebody who's going to be, you know,
I'd agree, immoral
in many ways. But I don't see that as an issue. I think the bigger issue would be to make it clear to the employee that you are an asset to come forward to, rather than them being dishonest about a leave to get some time off.
I totally agree, and that should I do think that I had a great chat with the Women's Aid in regards to, you know, it should be really communicated that this is a safe place. If this is something that you're going through, we will support you. I also think, Joe, you touched on something earlier, that a lot of this you might be doing already. You know, so this is for example, I'm sure most of the people on this webinar, if somebody came in the most vulnerable to you to say, you know what, I have to go to the solicitor tomorrow because I'm having an issue at home, more than likely, I'd say the majority of employers would go, that's no problem, take the time off, you know, and not force you to take a holiday. So I do think this is probably just putting a structure around it, rather than, you know, forcing companies into something that they don't want to do. or haven't been doing before.
Absolutely. I think the other thing as well is to, you know, you can hope that this won't affect you and you won't have to deal with this situation,
Sure.
but you know, the statistics are there. I mean, even Safe Island said that 1 in 4 women in Ireland at some point since the age of 15 have dealt with some form of abuse, some form of domestic abuse. So when you think about that metric in itself, that you do need to be ready to deal with these things. So you know, my personal experience is to have those resources to hand to make people aware of when they come to you.
Yeah. Now we have a number of questions as well, but I suppose just one thing to be clear on the domestic violence, and I'll go back to the questions then, is that this is also, because it's such a delicate leave, there is no proof required here. You know, so you do not need to have a Garda report or a letter from a solicitor or something like that. It is that somebody has come, and I actually think that's fair, Joe, because like you said, people are coming to you and they're most vulnerable. If I had to think of like, oh gosh, I've got to go and actually go and get a, you know, a report or something like that, I just won't bother coming to you. So there is no onus on proof on the employee, which I think is important. Joe, I have some bad news for you. I have a lot of questions here. A lot of them have to do with the sick leave, so we'll take a step back on the sick leave and we'll go through, and then there's a couple there on the DV leave as well. So sorry you're in the hot seat today. I won't lie, I'm happy you're there and not me. So okay, round one. So if someone is sick in December, continuing through to the end of January, as one occasion, would they be entitled to 5 days in December 2023 and then an additional 5 days in 2024 January?
Yes, yeah, because it's each calendar year you're entitled to it.
Yeah, so if I'm out from the 26th to the end of December, that's 5 days in 2023, and then I'm out from the 1st to the 5th, 5 days in January 2024.
Absolutely, yeah. It doesn't hit the reloads every year, essentially.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, someone is on long-term sick leave whose leave starts in 2023 and continues into 2024. Should they then get paid the 5 days in January 2024? So yeah, so I understand what they're saying is that someone has been on long-term sick leave in 2023. They are continuing to being in long-term in 2024. Does this person, are you paying them 5 days?
Yeah, I mean, if there isn't a sick pay system in place, if someone's on long-term sick, it's very unlikely they're still getting paid for being sick. So they are entitled. So every year that it comes around, they're entitled to avail of sick pay, as long as it's certified, which it should be if they're on long-term sick.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, another one on long-term sick. This might be a little bit specific, but we'll read through it anyway, is regarding long-term sick leave and annual leave accrual. Are employers required to pay out the annual leave in the year it accrued, or can they wait for the employee to return in which they have 15 months to take this leave following the end of the leave year it was accrued?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to keep in mind here is that you can't be on 2 leaves at once. So if you're on sick leave, you can't then get annual leave at the same time or simultaneously. So the leave has to be paid to them when they either resign or they can take it when they come back to work. Because the person is right that for any leave that's carried over when somebody is sick, it can be kept for 15 months. So that would be essentially January in the year and a half later. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, they can keep the leave, but you shouldn't be paying it to them if they're still out sick, because that will seem to be that the person is on both leaves at the same time. And you know, it's a health and safety provision to have annual leave. So you can't be sick whilst on annual leave, which is why if you are sick when you're on annual leave, you can get the doctor or your doctor to give you a sick cert, and then you can keep your annual leave balanced, because you're not supposed to be sick while you're resting and recuperating.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So if the employee is only off for 2 days, are they entitled to be paid sick pay? Yes. So they don't have to take the full 5 days. If you're sick for 1 day, it's 5 days over 12 months.
I think it's 5 separate incidents if you wanted it to be. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a block of 5 days together.
Yeah. Okay. Following on from the Musgraves example, does the statutory sick leave not force you to pay from day one? So I think that's an answer in response to my question is that if the first 3 days of your sick leave. Oh no, this is from the probation. So following on from the Musgraves example, does statutory sick leave force you to pay from day one? Only if it's less favourable, right?
That not necessarily, as long as you offer what could be seen as a preferable amount. So even if your company pays 4 weeks or maybe even 2 weeks, that may be seen as preferable. But the things that they're taken into consideration are how quickly can the person get the sick leave and how long do they have to be there by. The reason why Musgraves won is because they actually paid 8 weeks. And although it was less preferable in that, you can get the statutory leave after 13 weeks and Musgraves was 6 months, and it was 3 days waiting period, whereas it's straight away in statutory. The 8 weeks that person could receive thereafter meant that the policy was preferable to the statutory one. So while it could be seen as a precedent, there are still other things that be taken into consideration. So it just depends on the specific policy that is in place.
Yeah. Yes, I'd agree. This is again around the sick, lots of questions on sick leave. If the employer offers a more beneficial sick leave than the statutory sick leave, and the employee then uses up all this statutory sick leave, can they then claim the 5 days?
No, because your pay is, if you have one that's more preferable, then your sick pay is using that pay.
Yeah,
using that scheme.
You don't get both. That's it's. We do our sick. This is an interesting one actually. So we do our sick pay on a 12-month basis. So if someone takes their sick leave in May, they don't get sick leave again till May next year. So I suppose with this legislation, it's January to December, right?
Yeah. We have similar issues on the past when it comes to annual leave and the organisation of working time act. It's April to March. But yeah, sometimes there can be some mind-numbing calculations involved with that kind of thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. This is okay. So we'll take 2 more of these, and then we'll move on. Is if someone is sick and taking sick days here and there, but working from home in between, they haven't been in the office for 2 months. Is that okay? I suppose it'll be difficult for you to answer that, Joe, because we don't know is it certified. So let's pretend the days are certified. So they're working from home, they're taking sick days every couple of weeks, but they're certified and they haven't been back to the office. Is that okay? I suppose it depends what your policy is. Sorry for you.
At the core of the contract, you need to be fit and able to work. So there are times when intermittent absence could end up being dealt with through a disciplinary process. I know it sounds quite harsh, but if you have somebody who's been out with a sore ankle and then they had food poisoning and then the next week they had a migraine, as long as these issues can't be tracked to one specific area of disability, it could be a breach of their contract, and you can deal with it through an investigation and find out what's really going on. But at the end of the day, the employee needs to make sure they look after themselves enough to be available to work. So yes, they can get statutory sick pay for those separate days together, but you might want to consider putting in place a trigger point. So if you have a trigger point of 3 absences per 6 months, that might mean that you have to have a conversation with your line manager about these absences and what you may do to improve your rate of attendance at work.
Yeah. I think again, it's definitely around communication. And we'll go into some of the questions around the DV. So how retroactive can the domestic violence leave be? For example, if incidents have happened in the past, can they take leave off for this, or must it currently be ongoing?
It does say in the legislation that it can be in the past. So, somebody could be dealing with something like post-traumatic stress disorder, something along those lines, and it could mean that they are not able to work, and that's why it's stipulated that it's there for somebody to seek counselling as well. It is a brand new leave, and I appreciate that it's not difficult to deal with or to quantify, but yeah, it does say in legislation that it can be abuse that's happened in the past, and they can avail of the leave for that.
I think we've answered this already. Does the employer need to receive evidence? No,
they don't.
This is a question that actually has been asked several times of me is, does a company have a duty of care to report incidents of domestic violence to the Gardaí? I would presume not.
No, I mean, it's one of those wonderfully grey employment law HR areas. It's one that you have to use your judgment on. It's a very specific situation because not all of them are exactly the same. At the end of the day, it could be a breach of their own confidence and trust that you go to an external party and give their information to them or report it to them.
Yeah.
My approach would be to make sure that you support the employee as much as possible in the first instance.
Yeah, and one of the questions that I had been asked as well was if you know that there is violence going on in the home, and the violence is specifically to children in the home. But what I was corrected with is that you have always had, in that specific incidence, you have always had a duty of care to report that to the police under, I can't remember the legislation of it, just in the Safety Act. So that has not changed. So in regards to somebody saying that I need time off for domestic violence, you do not have a duty of care to go and report that to the police. Okay, a lot of these are around sick leave, so I just want I'll come back to the sick leave maybe at the end. I'm just conscious of timing. So yeah, okay, we'll come back to the sick leave questions. But so if we mosey on to we'll look at the enhanced. So I will get back to all those sick leave questions because there's a number of them there, but we'll get back to them at the end. So enhanced parental leave benefits.
I mean,
what am I getting, Joe?
So parents' leave is increasing again this year. So it's one leave that's increased exponentially over the last few years. It started out for 2 weeks of the child, or 2 weeks, went up to 5 weeks and 7 last year, and now from August this year it's going to be 9 weeks. The amount you're paid by the state as well has increased. So it's €274 per week. Both the parents can take it. It needs to be taken in the first year of the child's life. If you previously availed of this leave, say if your child was born in 2020, does not mean you get additional days now. It's dependent on when the child is born, but you do need to take the leave within 2 years of the child being born. It's another statutory leave, so it means that the employer cannot reject your request to take it. You do need to give your employer 6 weeks notice. The employer can, if they have very strong objective business reasons why, postpone it or ask you to postpone the leave. But for the most part, you should be giving it to them, and it can be quite a risk if you don't have strong business reasons why this person can't take the leave. Mm-hmm. It can also be broken up as well. It does not have to be in a 9-week chunk. It can be broken up in smaller amounts, but no smaller than a week. Yeah, it's just another one of the kind of social protections that have been introduced, and it's part of a larger theme of protections that are now given to workers as well. So it's a good thing. Yeah. And it's actually one that quite a lot of people avail of because it's, like maternity leave, paternity leave, adoption leave, it's paid as well. So it's quite popular to take. Yeah,
and to be clear as well, it's for both. It's not just for the mother, it's for mother and father, or?
Well, both mum and dad can take 9 weeks each. And it can't be transferred. So dad can't say, I can give my parents leave weeks to mum and she gets 18 weeks. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and that works like in some Nordic countries, I suppose. Yeah, not here.
Yeah.
Okie doke. So we will continue with the next area. I know you kind of it's a bit more specific, but we'll go to the strengthening collective redundancy provisions, a mouthful, and then we'll go back to some questions.
Yeah, so this is it's quite a specific update really, and it's born out of the insolvency bill of last year. So it's to do with companies face insolvency. So the idea is that the company that may be looking at going out of business still have responsibilities and to employees, mm-hmm. And that, which is also including the Protection of Employment Act and the Companies Act as well. So the main difference here is that if the company is facing liquidation, the liquidators still have to engage in a full consultation process with the employees. And often when a company goes out of business, the number of people going to be made redundant would mean it ends up being a collective redundancy. So that means oftentimes you have to deal with the employee's representative. There are other things that have been introduced as well. So if employees are made redundant before the 30-day period, so with collective redundancies, as most of you probably know, is that you need to inform the Minister for Enterprise and Employment 30 days before any redundancy is made. If you leave people go before that 30-day period, you could be looking at a fine, and that fine is significant. It's up to 250,000 a year. Yeah. So it's very important that you, with any redundancy process, you need to follow a fair, clear and transparent process. That means putting the employees at risk, going through a consultation process, and then making them aware of their redundancy. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously a protection there that's was seen as almost like a loophole before. But another thing that's happened as well is that if there is an associated company of the liquidated asset, that company could end up, well, the courts could order them to pay the debts, which means that the employees could still get relief in terms of their redundancy payment from the other asset.
Okay.
Rather than trying to find relief through the state.
Interesting. Yeah, and I suppose it's very specific to each individual company if they're going through that, just in regards to how many people, what kind of negotiations they're going. So if you are going to be going through that, if you find yourself in that situation, probably best to get in contact with someone like you, Joe, to go through specifics.
Yeah, I mean, we deal with redundancies all the time, both collective, individual as well. So it's something that also Insight HR are well versed in, and we do them simultaneously, many of them at the same time. But it is with redundancy, because the general principle is that it's the job being made redundant, not the person.
Yeah.
You do need to follow a very strong process, because if somebody brings an unfair dismissals claim against you, by virtue of the process you followed, you said they've done nothing wrong. So those awards can be up to 2 years' salary, and they are on average much higher than your regular unfair dismissal claim, because most of the time when somebody's been dismissed, they've been seen to contribute in some way, shape or form to their own dismissal. Whereas a redundancy, you're saying you've done absolutely nothing wrong, and yeah, I've lost my job.
Yeah, totally not your fault. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, we've got some questions around the parental leave. So we'll fire them at you, Joe. So can I have parents leave by 2 for twins? So example, I have twins born in 2022. Does this mean I get double the leave?
Not depends on what I know. Okay. It's for a birth of a child or childs.
Okay.
Might have to get back to you on that one though.
Okay. Well, so if someone doesn't give the 6 weeks notice for parental leave, can you use this as a reason for refusal?
I mean, technically, yes, but all it does really is push it a bit further down the line. If they want to take their leave, in 2 weeks' time, you can say, look, that's not really fair. I need to be able to prepare for you not being here. Mm-hmm. So it is a rational reason to turn it down, but it does not mean you can reject it and it won't come back. It just means that the employee may need to find a different date if they have not given you enough notice. But yeah, if they haven't given you 6 weeks notice, that is stipulated in the legislation, they do need to give you that.
Yeah.
Which is a fair amount when you consider the person could be gone for a significant amount of time.
Yeah. Can the parents' leave be broken up into 9 separate weeks? Yes,
they can.
So there's...
we need to be distinct as well between parental leave, which is 26 weeks unpaid, and parents' leave and benefit, which is going to be from August, 9 weeks paid by the state.
Yeah, and I think that is a typo here, in that it's enhanced parents' leave benefit.
Yes.
So which that is clear on. Okay, so we'll come back to the sick leave in a little bit. So lots of talk around the introduction to auto-enrollment pension scheme. We're not really much further on it, but maybe if you want to just give a brief kind of introduction of what it may entail or when it might come down the route, the line.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that this will be introduced in August, and it is the most significant update in terms of what's going on this year. And I'm sure that employers are quite nervous about it. But at the moment, legally, you don't have to give an employee a pension plan. All you have to do is offer them the opportunity to join PRSI. The issue is that not many employees avail of it. At the moment, I think it was the Irish Times a couple of years ago did a survey that said over half of people in Ireland do not have a pension plan, and they will be relying on the state pension, which could mean that they do not have enough money to keep themselves in the way that they've previously done during their working life. 75% of employers don't offer a pension plan at the moment, other than the PRSI, which they don't pay into. And the number one reason for people not having pension plans at the minute is because they don't feel like they can afford to pay into it. But likewise, 63% of those people that were surveyed said that they're worried about not having enough money when they retire. So something really had to give, which is why this leave's been introduced, and which is also why the base and the scope of people that will be auto-enrolled is large. So if you're aged between 23 and 60 and you're earning upwards of 20 grand a year, you'll automatically be enrolled into this scheme. To give you an idea of what the contributions are, to put in a kind of micro level, if you put in 3 euros, your employer will match that, and then the state will put in an additional euro. So at the moment, if you're on, say, 20,000, 300 will be put in by you, 300 will be put in by your employer, and 100 will be put in by the state. So 700 would be the minimum.
Yeah.
It's capped at 80,000 a year. So the maximum contribution for the employer would be 1,200 per year for somebody on that wage. So it may not be as daunting as people once thought, but it is obviously something that employers are going to have to be aware of, and it is an additional cost to operating as well. Mm. So, I mean, the main questions that I'm asked on a regular basis, because this is one that's coming down the line and it is causing some concern or anxiety for people, is can the employees opt out? And the answer is yes, but in the first 6 months, they can't. So for the first 6 months of the scheme, they can't come out of it. In the 7th or 8th month, they can then request to be taken out of the scheme. But likewise, in 2 years' time, if you're still in that eligibility criteria and you don't have an occupational pension plan, then you will be re-enrolled into it again.
For 6 months.
Yeah, and then you can come out of it in 6 months. So look, some people will not be particularly happy with that, because people are obviously feeling the crunch as well. But that's just how it is at the moment. Mm-hmm. Part-time workers are also included, because the main stipulation is earning over 20,000 a year. Gosh, what else is there? Oh, so, if the employer leaves you and goes somewhere else, their pension follows them. Yeah. So it's not like it is now. If you have an occupational pension plan, you have to go through the administration of changing it over to somewhere else or asking if it can follow you. It will just go with you because it's done through your payroll.
And I think, Joe, the one thing with the auto-enrollment is that, yes, there is going to be a cost, but it's just one of these things that's just being kicked down the line. It is going to come in. There is no kind of it whether it comes in the first half of the year or the second half of the year is debatable, but it is going to come in, right?
No, yeah, it's definitely coming in, and the date at the moment is August. It's something that we can't really deny. If people are relying on the state pension, and when we finally get to retire, whenever that be, probably in about 50 years for us, if there is still a state pension,
87 at that stage.
we need something else to rely upon. Mm-hmm. So with that is that this will work in tandem with the state pension. It's not instead of, you'll receive both, is the plan. Yeah. If you do have an occupational scheme, you won't be put into it if you do have a pension scheme, but you might want to change it over. If you have a personal pension scheme and you're the one paying into it, you might see the new scheme as being preferable because you're not the only person paying into it.
Yeah. Okay. The potential implementation of living wage. So something that's been thrown about for years now, just in regards to so living wage. Joe, are we all going to be getting an increase?
I think it was Theo Bradcar said a couple of years ago that we are committed to having a living wage by 2026. which is why we continue to see the increases in the minimum wage. So when it finally comes to having a living wage, it won't be such a drastic increase. You know, I mean, the government did take a different kind of studies under consideration. I think it was the Living Wage Ireland stated that by now we should be on $13.85 an hour. And sorry, that was last year, and this year it should be $14.80. So we're way behind that. The idea when it was announced was that it would be 60% of the median hourly rate in Ireland. So $12.70 is where it is at the moment. It's likely it's going to go up. Will it go up to the 60%? We're saying at the moment it's around 55%. It just depends. A lot can change between now and 2026. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't quite reach that level. But it's kind of up in the air, to be honest with you, at the moment.
Yeah. I think it's just something to keep an eye on, and that it's, again, it is coming. When it comes is the answer.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue. My opinion is that we'll continue to get yearly increases in the minimum wage, whether or not they start calling that a living wage by 2026 with no increase, or if there'll be a larger one than there has been. There's only been 4, 5, 6, 13% has been the biggest increase in the last few years. It just depends on whether or not they're going to do a real living wage, or it will be a new name for a national minimum wage.
So I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to pop on to and I've been waiting all day to see, is there any announcement today on the code of practice on flexible and remote working in regards to what the framework is? Nothing yet. Joe, we're eagerly awaiting. It was supposed to come out at the end of the month.
Yeah, it's supposed to be out, but like we've seen quite a lot over the last year or so, there's been quite a few
the number
delays.
of dates.
Yeah, I mean, look, the main thing to kind of wrap our heads around here is that this is not a right to work remotely or flexibly, it's the right to request it. There's clearly not everybody can work remotely. I personally work remotely, but somebody who works in the service sector, you know, waiters, waitresses, barmen, retail workers, you cannot work remotely. It's not possible. So all it is now is that if you want to request remote work or flexible work, you can put that request in writing, and then your employer or the employer has they have to put their justification in writing for you, whether they approve it or whether they reject it. Mm-hmm. That's what the policy is right now. And, you know, a lot of people, us included, we already have policies in place for this that we give to clients. When this leave comes in, when this, right to request remote work comes in, we're already ready for that. It's already in line. We know what to expect of this. It's just when it's actually passed into law is what we're waiting on at the moment. Yeah.
And I think that you guys would have said the same thing, Joe, is what I've been saying is that, you know, you shouldn't be waiting on this. What is it that you currently, for your own working practices, what's your current policy on it? And again, I think the underlying thing to all of these things is that this is really aimed at people who are just giving a flat, no, we don't do remote working or flexible working, and we don't even want to entertain it. It's giving a framework for employees and employers for that. If you do have some kind of hybrid or remote or flexible, and you are actively looking at it, this framework might help you, and you might be doing way more than is in the framework, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, there is quite a lot of different justifications that can be used if the employer does not feel comfortable with remote or flexible working as well. But you need to consider each situation separately. You know, no jobs are exactly the same, no situations are exactly the same. A lot of the time, one I've come across quite a lot is that I don't want them working from home because they are privy to confidential information that I don't want somebody seeing on the side of their kitchen table.
Yeah.
You know, if this employee has come to you and said, I have a self-contained office and all those kinds of things, then you do need to take that under consideration too. Yeah. Just because it's your preference to manage people in person rather than remotely isn't really going to wash. We all know from 2020 onwards that we were able to work from home. Yeah. And a lot of places found it to be a preference, but at the same time, it's not the easiest thing when somebody isn't right in front of you to kind of make sure that you're managing them the way you want to. So I understand it from both perspectives, but you need to have, you know, a strong objective, justifiable reasons why you're turning it down, and those need to be put in writing to the employee.
Yeah, and I think that that's the key, isn't it? It is that what it's going to stop is that just because I don't like it and I don't want to do it isn't actually a justification.
No, it's not.
You know,
it's not going to work anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a number of questions and we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm just going to really whistle stop to a real quick 5 minutes of these. And we'll send all the questions on to Joe. Unfortunately, to get a bit of homework and we can send out answers to them. Okay, so we'll look at some of the pension ones. Now, again, this isn't out yet, so I think some of these questions might not be kind of that we won't know these questions. The answer to these is: can I still contribute to my PRSA and get tax relief when auto-enrollment commences? I suppose that isn't really out.
If you have a pension plan already, you won't be auto-enrolled onto it.
Yeah. Pension auto-enrollment, is there a 3 postponement period as per UK auto-enrollment? So that's every 3 years, yes and no.
You have to be on the scheme for the first 6 months, and then if you want to come out of it, then you have an opportunity to do so. But there's no way of getting out of this when it is introduced.
If a scheme is in operation that has a voluntary enrollment, can auto-enrollment be ignored? No. Right.
No. If it's voluntary, if they're actually on it, then it's fine. If not, then they will be auto-enrolled onto it.
Will there be any contractor obligations in regards to the pension? So if I'm a contractor, not directly employed by you?
No.
Okay.
If you're as a self-employed situation, they're a contractor, really. Then you need to be an employee.
Will there be a similar setup for health insurance? Not at the moment, right?
No.
Oh, and so just to be clear, anyone over 20,000 is entitled to a pension scheme in August. No, it hasn't been out yet. It may be coming in August, and you may have to, the auto-enrollment may be in then, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. But those of us who are HR professionals know that you expect these things to come down the line, just like we're expecting the remote working policy to come out today, and it doesn't. The other thing as well is that, from years 1 to 3, it will be 1.5% of your wage that you'll be contributing. That's going to go up. That's going to escalate year on year. So I think it's years 4 to 6 is 3%. And then it goes 7 to 9 is 4.5%. And then finally in year 10 will be 6%. And that is matched by your employer. So you put in 6%, they put in 6%. And the government at that point will be putting in 2%.
We have a pension scheme to avail of, but you must be working for 6 months with us. Do we have to do the auto-enrollment?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it is looking like it's as black and white as, do you have a pension? If not, you're going to be auto-enrolled.
Yeah.
If it's a case that you want to come off of that pension plan when you become eligible for a more preferable one, then you can do that too.
Yeah. Okay, so we've answered these already. Can you continue? You can. If you can work remotely, but your employer feels HR should be on site regularly, can they refuse this? I suppose we'll wait for the framework to come out, but you have to have reasons why, right?
Yeah, there will be justifications included. I remember when the bill came out a couple of years ago, there seemed to be so many reasons why you can reject remote working or flexible working that it seems as if nobody would ever be given the opportunity to do so. That's why we're waiting for the actual law to come out so we can see the criteria. At the moment, we can't be 100% sure.
Yeah. Can remote working be done? This is asked a lot of the time. Can remote working be done from another country without the employer's knowledge or approval?
I mean, it should be in the contract. People should not be working for more than 1 month abroad, and they should be looking for permission to do so. If you're going to be working in a different place, if we're in Europe, fine, there's going to be very small time differences. But if you've gone somewhere like the United States and it's 5 hours behind on the Eastern Seaboard, then that could have a knock-on effect for the employer. They need to know where you are, and it's a fair thing to ask where the employee is. But yeah, for tax reasons, they shouldn't be working in a different country for more than a month.
And then also, like, even just for ourselves, I can say what we do ourselves is that we do have a change request form if somebody wants to change of where they are remotely working. But we are obviously, so we are ISO 27001 from a security perspective. I need to know that you're still in a secure area, like as in, you know, you were talking about that, you know, we don't want people working at their kitchen table. People have said that they're in a secure office area. If they're going to go to another location, regardless if it's in Ireland, I need to know from a GDPR perspective, if they're going outside of the EU, that's a reason for us to say, no, you cannot do that. So it's really down to your policy of what you want to accept. But I would certainly say that you should have a policy saying that employees should inform you if they're leaving the country or changing their current remote working area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it would not be, you know, a lot of people may want to work in a cafe, but the stuff that you're working on may not be something that, you know, you should be exposing to an open Wi-Fi system and to the general public who may be walking by and for whatever reason may decide to look at your laptop for whatever reason, or you could even lose your laptop.
Yeah.
Somebody could steal your laptop as well. So there's a load of security implications that have to be considered, which is why you need to make your employer aware.
This is going to just be the last question that we take because it's come up a couple of times, and I know I've got about 30 other questions. I'm just so conscious of time. Can I check again, please, if it complies with the legislation under the sick pay scheme? And it's again around the question of that it's from the January to December. So if your current sick pay goes on a 12-month rolling period, that doesn't comply anymore. You've got to be in the January to December period, right?
Yeah, but again, if
from a page perspective,
if your company offer a more preferable sick pay scheme, then that's what's used. So it'd be the rolling.
Yeah. So for example, if I get a 10 days in a 12-month rolling, that's more preferable from getting 5 days in a January to December.
Exactly. Yeah.
If I only get 2 days in a 12-month rolling, no.
Exactly. Yeah. That would be looked at.
Yeah. So so have a look at that. Okay, so thank you so much, Joe. I'm unfortunately going to send you these 83 questions when you get some time, if you could complete them. So we'll go through all the questions, but really what we will do is we will share, unfortunately, Joe's email address with everybody. And if anybody has any very specific questions or just questions around your own setup, please feel free to contact Joe, anybody at the team here. There were a couple of questions there and I didn't really have time to go into them of how to set up the domestic violence leave type within HRLocker, or how to set up those specific leave types of flexible remote working. So if people want to speak to their account manager or to anybody on the team here about that, please feel free. Our next webinar will be in the next few weeks, and it will be on the new user interface within HRLocker. So we're getting a bit of an uplift, and we'll be releasing that any day now. And also we'll go through the new look and feel of HRLocker as well. Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.